On a cold December morning in 1945, a group of women walked to the gallows at Hamelin prison. They were not ordinary criminals, but former SS guards of Bergen-Belsen, infamous for their cruelty inside one of Nazi Germany's most horrific concentration camps. Before a British executioner placed the noose around their necks, their names had already become symbols of human depravity. Irma Grese, Elisabeth Volkenrath, Johanna Bormann. The executions shocked the world, not only because of the scale of their crimes, but because these were women, entrusted with power inside a system of death, who had shown no mercy. To understand how they came to stand on that scaffold, we must return to the final months of World War II, when Allied troops uncovered Bergen-Belsen's nightmarish reality and demanded swift justice for those who had turned cruelty into daily routine. Bergen-Belsen began in 1940 as a prisoner of war camp, but by 1943 it had been converted into a concentration camp under the SS. Located in Lower Saxony, Germany, it became infamous not for gas chambers, but for the appalling conditions that killed tens of thousands through starvation, disease, and neglect. By the time British troops liberated it on April 15, 1945, they were confronted with over 60,000 emaciated survivors and more than 13,000 unburied corpses. The name Belsen quickly became synonymous with human suffering. Central to the camp's daily operation were the SS guards, both male and female. Roughly 3,600 women served as concentration camp guards across the Nazi system, with Bergen-Belsen employing dozens at different times. These women were typically recruited from working-class backgrounds, trained at Ravensbrück, and assigned to oversee female prisoners. Their duties ranged from maintaining order to enforcing brutal punishments, often with shocking cruelty. Unlike the common perception of women as passive figures in wartime, many of these guards wielded real authority. Survivors recalled their violence, beatings, whippings, and selections for death transports. Among them were names that would later be etched into history: Irma Grese, notorious for her sadism; Elisabeth Volkenrath, a senior overseer; and Johanna Bormann, remembered for her vicious treatment of prisoners. In the months following liberation, the British military faced the urgent task of bringing Bergen-Belsen's perpetrators to justice. Survivors' testimonies painted a chilling picture of systematic abuse, and the evidence was overwhelming. To respond swiftly, the Allies organized the Belsen trial, officially known as the Trial of Josef Kramer and 44 others, held in the German city of Lüneburg between 17 September and 17 November 1945. The trial placed both male and female staff of Bergen-Belsen in the dock, 45 defendants in total, including notorious figures from Auschwitz who had been transferred to Belsen in the last months of the war. Out of these, 16 were women. Many were still young. Irma Grese, for example, was only 21 years old when she faced the court. Charges were based on crimes against humanity and war crimes, focusing on their participation in the murder, ill treatment, and neglect of prisoners. Survivors gave harrowing testimony, describing guards who beat prisoners mercilessly, set dogs on them, and selected them for transports to death camps. The female guards were not treated differently by the court. Their actions were judged by the same standard as their male counterparts. At the conclusion, 11 defendants were sentenced to death. Among them were 3 women: Irma Grese, Elisabeth Volkenrath, and Johanna Bormann. Their executions would make history as a rare and shocking example of women being hanged for war crimes. Irma Grese, as known as the Beautiful Beast, became the most infamous of all the female guards tried at Belsen. Born in 1923, she joined the SS at just 19 after working on a farm and briefly in a hospital. Trained at Ravensbrück, she was transferred to Auschwitz, where survivors remembered her vicious punishments and her sadistic pleasure in tormenting prisoners. Known for carrying a whip and a pistol, she was accused of setting dogs on inmates and participating in selections for the gas chambers. In March 1945, she was moved to Bergen-Belsen, where her brutality continued until liberation. At trial, she showed little remorse, appearing defiant even as survivors testified against her. At just 22 years old, she became the youngest woman executed under British law, hanged on 13 December 1945. Elisabeth Volkenrath, born in 1919, rose to the position of Oberaufseherin, the chief female overseer at Auschwitz and later Bergen-Belsen. Unlike Grese's flamboyant cruelty, Volkenrath's reputation rested on her authority and cold efficiency. She supervised female guards, organized punishments, and was directly involved in selections. Survivors described her as stern, ruthless, and unwaveringly loyal to the SS system. At the Belsen trial, she was convicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity. On 13 December 1945, she was hanged alongside Grese, her death marking the fall of one of the highest-ranking female SS leaders. Johanna Bormann, nicknamed Weasel by prisoners, was older than many of her fellow guards. Born in 1893, she had worked as a domestic servant before joining the SS. She served at Ravensbrück and Auschwitz before being transferred to Bergen-Belsen. Known for unleashing her dogs on prisoners and for indiscriminate beatings, her cruelty left deep scars in survivors' memories. During the trial, she often claimed she had only followed orders, but witness after witness described her brutality. She was condemned to death and hanged with Grese and Volkenrath in December 1945. Together, these three women became enduring symbols of female complicity in Nazi terror. Their executions shocked a world unaccustomed to seeing women punished so severely for acts of violence. Yet for survivors, the sentences represented long-awaited justice. The death sentences handed down at Lüneburg were carried out less than a month later at Hamelin prison, a grim fortress on the river Weser. On the morning of 13 December 1945, Britain's chief executioner, Albert Pierpoint, was tasked with hanging 11 of the condemned, including the three women from Bergen-Belsen. The executions were not conducted in an open square before a gathered crowd, but they were far from private. British military authorities allowed press coverage, official witnesses, and extensive documentation, ensuring that the world would know the fate of the Belsen Guards. Newspapers quickly reported the dramatic events. Irma Grese, at only 22, walked calmly to the scaffold and reportedly said "Schnell" before the trap was sprung. Elisabeth Volkenrath followed, silent and resigned, while Johanna Bormann reportedly cried out in panic as she was led to her death. Pierpoint carried out the executions swiftly, one after another, in what was the largest mass hanging of female war criminals in British history. Though conducted within prison walls, the spectacle of women hanged for war crimes carried immense symbolic weight. To many, these executions were public in the sense that they were openly announced, widely reported, and intended to demonstrate that justice had been served, regardless of gender. The executions of the Bergen-Belsen Guards reverberated far beyond the prison walls of Hamelin. For survivors, they were a measure of justice, a recognition of the suffering inflicted under the women's authority. Testimonies of starvation, savage beatings, and sadistic cruelty had been heard in court, and the hangings gave many the sense that at least some perpetrators had been held accountable. The international press seized on the story, emphasizing the extraordinary fact that women, often idealized as nurturing figures, had committed such atrocities and were now punished with death. Headlines branded Irma Grese as the beautiful beast or the Belsen witch, both fascinated and horrified by her youth and appearance. Elisabeth Volkenrath and Johanna Bormann, though less sensationalized, were also remembered as proof that female perpetrators could be as ruthless as their male counterparts. Politically, the execution signaled Allied determination to pursue justice without distinction of gender or rank. The symbolism was powerful. These women were not spared because of their sex. They had held power, inflicted terror, and now faced the ultimate penalty. Over time, their cases became central to debates about female complicity in Nazi crimes and challenged assumptions about the nature of women in positions of violence. The hanging of Grese, Volkenrath, and Bormann did not mark the end of reckoning for Bergen-Belsen's staff. Many other guards faced varying sentences. Herta Ellert received 15 years but was released early. Herta Both, known as the sadist of Stutthof, was sentenced to 10 years. Others were acquitted, their roles judged too minor or evidence insufficient. Out of roughly 60 women brought before Allied courts, only 21 were executed. The broader denazification process revealed both the scale of female participation in Nazi crimes and the limits of post-war justice. While the most notorious figures were punished severely, many lower-ranking guards quietly reintegrated into society after serving their sentences. For historians, this raised difficult questions. How should responsibility be measured in a system built on obedience and terror? And why did so many women choose to embrace violence? The executions at Hamelin thus became both justice served and a reminder of the many unanswered questions left in the war's aftermath. The executions of the Bergen-Belsen female guards marked one of the most striking moments of post-war justice. They revealed that cruelty was not confined to men and that women, too, could wield power with devastating brutality. To survivors, their deaths offered a sense of closure, though it could never erase the trauma of the camps. Today, their legacy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, responsibility, and complicity. The question remains, how easily could ordinary people become agents of evil?